Hello and welcome to the Vegan Corner. This is our video for one of the most popular recipes in the whole world, pizza. There are two kinds of this traditional Italian course. Deep pan pizza, which is beautifully soft, pillowy and usually cooked in an oven tray, and the more classic thin round pizza, commonly baked using a baking stone or a log-fired oven. We will obviously share both preparations with you, but today's recipe is about preparing deep pan pizza. You will find the ingredient list in the description below the video. To begin with, place the salt and 3 tablespoons of the flour from the recipe into a small bowl and stir to combine them. The quantity of salt recommended in this recipe will allow you to obtain a real Neapolitan pizza. However, if you are not planning to use salt, simply skip this step altogether. Now pour the water into a bowl large enough to accommodate all the ingredients and dissolve the yeast into the water by rubbing it between your fingers. Here we are using fresh yeast as it is the conventional choice. However, you can also use instant yeast by adding it into the water and whisking until it dissolves, or use active dry yeast and activate it as instructed on the packet. Now add the flour-salt mix into the bowl and whisk the ingredients properly. You can now start adding the flour into the water 3 tablespoons at a time and whisking vigorously to incorporate it. Keep adding the flour in batches, making sure to disperse it before adding more. At a certain point, the mixture will become too hard to be managed with a whisk, so swap it for a spatula and keep adding flour and stirring it in. Once the mixture becomes too hard for the spatula, it is time for you to get your hands dirty. Transfer the soft dough onto a working surface and start kneading it by hand, adding more of the flour every time it becomes sticky. There isn't an exact amount of flour you should use, whilst there is a minimum and maximum amount you should keep in between. The reason for this is that different flours yield very different results, and there is no way to tell exactly what results you are going to get from the flour you are using. But don't be scared. This is actually a good thing, and it will help you to obtain a perfect dough at every attempt, as you'll be in control of how much flour you are adding into the recipe. The entire process of making pizza dough should last for about 20 minutes, as this is the time it generally takes to properly incorporate the flour into the water and for the gluten to properly develop. The exact same process can also be done completely by hand, which is the traditional way, or using a stand mixer, which is the cheat, no sweat way. The kneading process can be brought to an end as soon as the dough becomes soft and elastic to the touch, but not sticky, as you can see here. It is now time to divide the dough into portions of a size appropriate for the trays you are going to use. We are using a scale to get perfect results, and unless you have a grandmother to hand, as they are known to be nothing short of walking kitchen scales, we recommend you to do the same. To help you better understand how much dough to use, we have created an Excel spreadsheet that will help you with the math. You can download it by following the link in the description below the video. After the dough has been divided, the portions need to be rounded. This process is once again easier to show than to explain, so here it is. Once the rounding of the portions is complete, it is time for the dough to relax, a process needed to obtain a final pizza that is easy to shape. Spray a bowl with some water, dust a piece of greaseproof paper or a wooden surface with some flour, place a portion of the dough onto the flour, and use the bowl to cover the dough. Repeat the process for the other portions of the mixture, making sure to use bowls that are roughly 1 inch larger than the dough. The small amount of water in the bowl will prevent the surface of the dough from drying out during the process. Now, let the dough rest for 30 minutes before moving on. During this time, the gluten will relax, yielding a softer and easy to roll final dough. Once the time has elapsed, you will see that the dough is a bit flatter than before, which means that the relaxation process worked and you haven't just wasted 30 minutes of your life, which is always relieving. At this point, the relaxed portions need to be rolled down using a rolling pin. So dust the surface with some flour, place the dough onto it, add some more flour onto the dough, and start rolling it down. You want to obtain a flat dough that roughly matches the size and the shape of the tray you are going to use. Whilst you are rolling one piece of the dough, make sure to keep the others covered to prevent the surface from drying. Now, to prevent the pizza from getting stuck to the pan during the cooking process, you can either use a non-stick tray or grease the tray with some oil or with a low-fat oil spray. You could also use some greaseproof paper or some flour, but these two methods make the dough more difficult to stretch and also prevent the bottom of the pizza from becoming crisp. Now simply move the dough onto the tray and gently stretch it by hand until it perfectly matches with the surface of the tray. To keep the surface of the pizza moist, you can spray the internal surface of a second tray with water and use it to cover the tray containing the pizza. Alternatively, you can also cover the tray with a damp kitchen towel, making sure that the pan is deep enough so that the pizza does not come into contact with the towel during the rising time. Another option is to brush a thin layer of oil onto the surface of the pizza, or use once again an oil spray to obtain the same result. If using these methods, you won't need to cover the pizza. To know how much dough you need to obtain a pizza of a certain thickness, you can refer to the Excel file I've mentioned before. The next step is to pierce the entire surface of the dough using a fork, which will allow for a more even rising and cooking later on. Once all the pizzas have been rolled down, pierced and covered, it is time for them to rise until roughly double in size, a process that will take approximately 3 to 24 hours, depending on which one of our recipes you decide to follow. The best proofing chamber you have in your house is your oven. That's right, just don't turn it on. Simply place the trays into the cold oven and leave them there for the entire duration of the rising time. The most popular times required to obtain pizza are 4, 8 or 24 hours in total, which mostly depend upon the quantity of yeast you use and the temperature of the environment. A small quantity of yeast will ask for longer rising time and will yield an overall better tasting pizza with a complex aroma. However, a large quantity of yeast will require a shorter rising time, which still yields a great pizza with a more delicate aroma. 30 minutes before the rising time has elapsed, remove the trays from the oven and preheat it to 250 degrees Celsius or 480 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. Once the rising time has elapsed, the pizzas are doubled in size and the oven ready, you can begin with the cooking process. Uncover the tray, if it was covered, place it into the oven and cook the pizza for exactly 4 minutes. You don't want to add any topping to the pizza during the first part of the cooking process, as the dough will collapse under the weight of the sauce, which would be disastrous at this stage. Once the time is up, remove the pizza from the oven and you'll find yourself in front of something that looks like this. A soft and pillowy piece of bread that doesn't resemble pizza in the slightest. But don't worry, we are going to fix that in just a moment, as it is now time to add your favorite toppings. First, let's begin by adding a good layer of pizza sauce on top of the base. There isn't a specific quantity of sauce to be added to the pizza, but there are indeed some guidelines, which I've added to the Excel spreadsheet. Now, let's move on to the cheese. Simply add as much as you want of it, making sure to be generous as it is really delicious. You can use any sauce and cheese you desire for the pizza. We are using our own pizza sauce and mozzarella cheese, and you can find the link to those recipes in the description below the video and in the cards. If you want to add different toppings, some classic options are grilled vegetables, olives, fresh tomatoes, dried tomatoes, pesto sauce, capers, garlic, onions, basil, artichokes, fresh or dried chilies, and cooked spinach. Once all the toppings have been added, simply place the tray back into the oven and bake the pizza for an additional 5 minutes or until the smell is just irresistible. After this time, you will find yourself in front of the most amazing homemade pizza ever, with a superb soft consistency and loads of flavor. Personally, I find it very difficult to resist the urge to eat 3 or 4 of these pizzas in a row, and that is exactly why I commonly do so. Now, if you opted for the no-oil methods, the crust of your pizza won't color as much as it could. This is perfectly normal, and please don't be tempted by keeping the pizza in the oven for more time trying to brown it more, as this will evaporate more water from the pizza, making it chewier and not as good as it should be. For the sake of doing a to-the-point video, as opposed to a boring 46 minutes one, we decided to stay focused on the most important aspects of the recipe. However, good quality pizza classes generally last for days, so we couldn't really squeeze everything we wanted into this video without making it excessively long. However, if you are serious about making pizza and want to know more about it, you will find all sorts of geeky resources, tips and tricks in the description below the video, which will not only answer the most common questions, but it will also turn you into a professional pizza machine in no time at all. And remember that if something is not clear to you, or simply you need some help to obtain a killer pizza, feel free to leave a comment and I'll answer your questions as soon as I can. If you enjoyed this pizza-based episode of the Vegan Corner, please don't forget to hit the like button before moving on and subscribe if you haven't already. Many thanks for watching and to the next video.